It's great to have everybody here today. Obviously, we're wanted to talk a little bit about some of the different ways that organizations are coming from the COVID crisis and how we're going towards growth and recovery, and how they're implementing some things like telemedicine and other technologies. But before we got started, wanted to kind of ask a quick question, because I'm always interested in this one. Is as everybody has been in quarantine, what sort of hobby have you developed to pass the time? Tom, you look like you're thinking about which one to say. I'm gonna.
Oh, well, I'll just say I started reading books with my 7-year-old.
Oh, very cool. What's the
Start off
series?
with we're in Ricky Ricotta and his crazy robots.
Okay, I don't even know what that one is. What is that one about?
It's about a little mouse who has a pet robot.
A mouse who has a pet robot. I like it. That's pretty cool. I have an 8-year-old and a 10 and 11-year-old, so we're in that same kind of category. We haven't read that one though. Very cool. What about the rest of you? What hobbies have we been developing?
Let's see. So I'm really interested in my family genealogy, and so I've learned some new information about my family. So it's been very cool.
Very cool. Have you done the 23andMe DNA testing and all of that?
I've done both Ancestry and 23andMe, and so you get access to a wealth of knowledge on the Ancestry in particular, because there are several people tracking their family trees, and so I got linked into one of those, so I was able to fill in some missing pieces of my puzzle through that. So it's been very neat.
Very nice. Yeah, I've done the 23andMe DNA test, but I haven't gotten into the genealogy yet. That is something I want to do. That sounds like fun. Very cool. Who else got a fun hobby they've been developing?
Well, for me, my husband and I have been giving all of our streaming services a workout. So going through every single series that we can. And so we were early adopters of Disney Plus. So we've been going through literally all 21 Marvel films. So
Nice.
that's been pretty exciting in this quarantine environment.
All right. If you've gone through those, have you watched the Mandarin?
I have,
The
yeah, the
Mandalorian.
Mandalorian. Yes, the
Mandalorian.
Mandalorian.
Yeah.
It was very, very good. Cute little baby Yoda. Yeah. We enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, that was a very cool show. They did a good job with it. I can't wait for the next one to come out.
They did.
So very cool. Anybody else have one they want to share?
I mean, I'm a cyclist, and the sheer fact that we don't have tourists in the city is like a dream.
Oh my gosh.
So it's, I mean, even just going to the park is very different. So, it feels like it's just New Yorkers hanging out in their city. So, while it is a bit different, of course, it's somewhat nice.
Yeah, I guess there are perks. There are silver linings. So very good, very cool. Well, just as a quick introduction, obviously today we it's effectively, this is something where obviously I'm not here to do a presentation. I want to facilitate a discussion amongst all of you. And really part of the reason why we're recording is because we hope that the information from this will be helpful to other people. Because obviously everybody's trying to figure out how to come from the COVID-19 crisis and how to capitalize on the opportunities that are there, recover from the problems that they've had, obviously financially, and having any information from all of you is going to be very helpful. So ultimately, this is really about me just kind of opening up questions, maybe offering bits and things that I've seen, and then really facilitating that conversation with you all. So please don't be shy. And, effectively, I don't have to tell anybody about, kind of the times that we're in, and forcing pretty much everyone to become innovators at this point. The impact that COVID-19 has had has literally required everybody to kind of begin thinking a little bit differently about what they do, and has had a strain on all of the health systems around the country. And I think actually, one of the things I saw, and I was looking at this, that I was looking at a chart that I have here that I saw from the American Hospital Association, that the median hospital cash on hand was projected to drop 26% from about 190 days to 140 days by the end of 2020 as an average. And so I think everybody's kind of feeling that. And so the idea was that, a lot of people have spun up things like telehealth. The CMS, I'm sure all of you have seen, that they're seriously considering keeping telehealth at the reimbursement rates that they're at now. 3 states are aggressively pursuing that and trying to make that become law as we speak. There's a lot of other things that have been going on around organizations trying to make sure that they can take advantage of the situation to serve their communities and grow during this process. So that's really kind of where ultimately we want to spend some time together. And the first, sort of question topic to kind of round robin and discuss a little bit is, as organizations are beginning to reopening for non-essential procedures, I believe probably everybody is to some extent already started that process, how you're beginning to balance the need for safety to take care of the patients and make sure that we're preventing the spread of COVID-19 and helping them just to feel safe, as well as the need to grow for financial recovery, and how things like telemedicine might play into that strategy and for increasing capacity and long-term growth, or any other strategies or things that you're implementing. So I'll open that up and see who wants to kind of jump in first.
I can go first.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi. So one of the things that we're doing, I have a 50-50 role with UC San Diego Health and with the UC wide healthcare system. So at a local level, we have been starting to ramp up a lot of our elective surgeries, as well as we are going to be offering all of our UCSD students on-site schooling. So with that and needing to test vendors and volunteers, we have been really looking into increasing our rapid testing. We have a plan to test our students every 2 weeks while they're on campus. I think that's a really hefty goal that we're undertaking, but we'll see how that goes. And then we've just brought up today in one of our town halls the need to have more patient support from their visitors or family members, and figuring out, with the use of our iPads that are in all of our inpatient rooms, of having that connection to a family member and how that really helps to play into the patient's recovery process. So trying to make that connection. And then some things that we are also looking at is a balance between our in-person versus our video visits, and looking at where that is a good formula balance for our percentage that we have. Right now it's overall an average about 50-50, 50% in person, 50% are through video. Post-COVID, we want to continue to have fairly high rates for our video visits, depending on the specialty. So we're going through and developing some of our standard work and looking at sort of always and never scenarios. When can you always schedule for a video visit? When can you not? And really approaching that from an education standpoint for the staff and schedulers to then either promote the video visits or the in-person if necessary. And then as far as our communication, we're also really trying to develop a better digital front door for our patients and have that be a more seamless experience, so that we can drive up our access and volumes back to a normal sort of rate that they were post-COVID or pre-COVID.
Right. Now, interesting. So I guess two questions. One, I noticed something that you're part of the UC Health, the UC Telehealth Collaborative. I'm curious, could you explain a little bit, what is the UC Telehealth Collaborative?
Sure. So what we are looking to do is really leverage So we have 6 UC health systems across the state of California, as well as 11 school campuses. So we're really trying to leverage scalability with all of our providers across California in those health systems, with trying to provide access to all of the patients that we serve across California as well. So the goal is that we are going to start by offering telehealth, specifically telemental health services for students on campus. So our provider could be located at UC Davis Health and provide telehealth services for a student at UC San Diego. So really trying to leverage that scale and provide a lot of efficiencies and continuity of care within our internal system.
Fascinating. Okay, so great. So trying to almost kind of take the independent states and pull them together into kind of a United States, if you will, to get some scale.
That is the goal. It is
Right.
quite an undertaking, but yes.
Sure. Yeah. No, I imagine that's a little bit like herding cats. So, all
Whatever
right.
you call it.
I'm sure we all feel that way.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's great. I'd love it. Anybody else have thoughts on kind of how they're using this?
I mean,
Well-
I think, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say to just add on to what Lisa was saying, one of the things that I've been really collecting information, and I think to educate them on what are the things that I need to understand, what should I believe? And I think our communications and marketing team really did a great job of distilling that information into digestible information for our patients, doing really interesting infographics, really leveraging social media to get the word out. And I think that truly created a more sticky relationship between us and our patients, because we moved beyond simply just providing care, but also providing education and providing that comfort and calm that they were expecting. So I remember one day going into my social media feed on Twitter, and literally, I mean, there was so much information about, do you wear a mask? Do you not wear a mask? How often should you wash your hands? Basic things that I think our communications team decided to lean into, and our marketing team decided to lean into and say, our patients are getting flooded with so much information. How can we make this easy and simple for them and calm their fears about whether they're going to contract it, whether they're going to spread it, and give them tangible things they can do. And I think that education piece, leaning into that, was really helpful in creating that relationship, growing our presence and our leadership in that space, particularly in North Carolina. And I think going forward, a lot of different health systems will probably be using more of that education component as a way to deepen relationships with patients. So in addition to all the fantastic things that Lisa said, and I'm very intrigued by what she said that her organization is doing, I think we really leaned into the education piece as a way to develop and nurture those relationships with patients.
Yeah, I remember actually a few times our team had looked at some of your content. I'm sure we've probably looked at everyone's content here at some point.
Yeah.
But your team's content was actually was really good and quite on par with what we were looking to accomplish. And I think the continuation of that, right? Because every local government is handling this slightly different. And the reopening, obviously, in North Carolina is different than the reopening in New York. And obviously, everyone will be leveraging telemedicine services in different ways to help mitigate that capacity. But those high density population areas really need that education of how are we as healthcare institutions keeping our patients safe. And it's up to the communications and marketing teams to help provide that reassurance and guidance. And also, how can they be empowered in a remote monitoring system, and recognize you don't have to procrastinate your care, right? We want you to still be empowered to, pay attention to your symptoms. And I think all of that, even at the individual service line level, that education and constant communication is really, really critical.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I can't remember who it was, but I was looking at somebody's content, and it was interesting things like, can seasonal allergies make you dizzy, or
Right.
can chlorine kill the coronavirus? And so it's like very practical things, like we're all going out in nature and making and hiking more, and so we get allergies and we start to get dizzy, and we think, oh my gosh, what's going on? You know, like that helping assuage those fears that might come from that. Or like, I have 3 boys, they want to go to the pool every day. I'm like, I don't know, is that cool? And then, like, you know, finding out that chlorine, you know, as long as it's properly maintained, can kill viruses like that. It's very, very handy. So no, I love that approach. That's great.
Yeah.
And I think, now, do you pronounce your name Jamie?
Yes, it's Jamie, yes.
Okay. I think she raises a great point regarding how critical the marketing and communications team became during this pandemic, and the fact that, you know, I saw all the various mix of tactics leveraged in order to get the messages out to people wherever they are, whether that was through digital methods, through the media, social media. You know, I was really impressed with our organization and our ability to do that, as well as health systems across the country.
Yeah, I know you guys had launched a CEO weekly video that, you know, seemed to be really, really good and really well done. How was that received?
You know, the community was really appreciative because they were just hungry for content, as Jamie stated. The same was true in our market as well. And so it really provided a calming effect to hear from the authority figure of our health system, and to provide that reassurance that, you know, we had everything under control as well as we could.
Yeah. And now, Shaka, I know you started, you've been in healthcare marketing for about 20 years, previously at Rex Healthcare, not too far away from Atrium. And you know, without question, healthcare is shifting to become a lot more of a consumer-driven industry. And especially with things like telemedicine, one of the things I've been seeing a lot of healthcare organizations talk about is how it's kind of lowering, in some cases, demolishing some of those normal barriers to entry, whereas healthcare used to be pretty much local. In some cases, it can be opened up much more broadly. In fact, I think it was BB Healthcare, their CEO, was talking about that specifically, and how he was excited about using it to break out of their own, you know, normal communities. How are you seeing the role of changing inside of organizations as these new ways of thinking kind of start taking place?
You know, what's been interesting for me is just to see how we got to see trial by fire in this pandemic case of adoption of telehealth, because, you know, we had telehealth, but it was being used very limitedly prior to the pandemic hitting. And we were, you know, still kind of playing around with the infrastructure of how to use it with our employed physicians. We were primarily using it more from an express care type need. But it was just interesting to see how quickly we were able to mobilize using it for our routine physician office visits. So with the current health system that I'm a part of, we're in a rural part of the country. So I would think that the adoption of telehealth nationwide actually presents sort of a threat in that people have access to, like you stated, wherever they may want to access care, not necessarily locally. So it's important for us to be able to keep up with the technology and to prove ourselves as access and convenient as we can for our market.
Yeah. Very interesting. So Sherry, I know, you know, from your perspective, there's been a number of things that, you know, I believe the organization has been doing. How have you guys been thinking about, you know, kind of building in, whether it be, you know, partnerships that you guys may have formed that have been newly formed around some of these things, or maybe areas where you've kind of looked at kind of using this moment in time to grow?
So I think a little bit of both. One is, I think, at the height of kind of mobilization around the crisis. So at Trinity Health, you know, we're a national health system. We're in 22 markets. And we also have clinically integrated networks in nearly all of our markets. And so what we were seeing a lot of is 2 things. One is for the independent physicians and other providers that are in our clinically integrated networks, but aren't necessarily kind of owned and operated by Trinity Health. We're really seeking help from us around information, because as you said, there's been conflicting information, right? Information, resources, frankly, at some points, PPE, other things. And so it enabled us actually to strengthen our relationships with a lot of independent providers in our markets, because we could add value for them in a way that we hadn't, necessarily been able to do so before. So I think it helps strengthen those relationships with physicians. And then we're also seeing employers coming to us, and I'm interested if other folks are seeing that as well, where employers are seeking out health systems to be the source of truth in how do they reopen safely, how do they manage their employee workforce, and what precautions do they need to take. So those were we would call our community partners that we've partnered with more directly to provide services to employers and their employee workforce. And then thirdly, I think as we've moved from less of immediate crisis mode and more to kind of management and emergence mode, we're seeing a number of things. So we're seeing a number of organizations that are questioning whether remaining independent makes sense for them, or whether they want to be part of a larger system. So we're having a lot of discussions there. But of course, we as a large national system were also financially affected by, it's not like we were immune. So we have to manage our own kind of stabilization and recovery with really partnering with others to prevent them from being able to not service their communities or their parts of the community. So it's a balance between, the airline analogy of like, put your mask on yourself before you help others, but we're trying to do both at once. I see that as a silver lining coming out of this, is it's really had more crucial conversations come forward and accelerated in partnerships that we've been trying to cultivate, but maybe there hadn't been as much of an impetus before.
Yeah, so it's a great opportunity, I guess, depending on how your strategic model is, of being able to find ways of either further consolidating to increase the efficiency of care and kind of grow those referral models, where you can kind of maybe lock those down a little bit more, kind of build those to be a little bit more efficient. So I could definitely see that. And I know you guys have been running a campaign. I believe it was your campaign that was the Here Beside You campaign. That was yours, correct?
Yes, that's been our hashtag. Yeah, and in full disclosure, so I'm more of a strategist than a marketer. We do have a separate marketing team that I work with very closely. So I'm not as close to all of the marketing work that we do. But yes, Here Beside You was ours. I think it's a very good fit. Again, it goes back to that people seeking out healthcare providers as the source of truth in a world of conflicting information, and also the fact that we're a faith-based health system. And so there's kind of that mind, body, spirit connotation with Here Beside You as well.
Right. Yeah. No, I loved the togetherness aspect of it, and kind of how the idea there was like, hey, we're in this together as a community, and kind of trying to make that message clear. It was great. It was a great message. So any other thoughts, Tom, or anyone on kind of how you've been leveraging some of these technologies, or what strategies you put in place to kind of begin moving back towards growth as we come out of this COVID situation?
I can mention a couple, and it's funny. I mean, I'm from Baylor Scott and White, once again, a faith-based system down in Texas, about 10 million, but pretty regionally concentrated, and we've certainly had the same financial struggles as everybody else. And I think we've done reasonably well on some of the marketing side as well. I've seen a lot of draw from our patients wanting us to be the communicator and curator of the story for them. The area, so I lead our digital team, and so my slant might be more digitally oriented. And certainly we saw a volcanic eruption in digital health, which has been amazing for my industry. But we've also not just the growth side, it's really the mindset shift that, I feel like for 4 years I've been a secondhand car salesman trying to sell digital. It's like this thing. And that we've seen a material shift in mindsets of our clinicians and administrators towards an openness to think differently and be different, and actually integrate digital into our consumer value proposition. And we've really looked to kind of use this COVID crisis as an accelerator towards consumerism and really challenging how we are going to go to market, how we partner, especially with our network, and then also with our customers. And so I think there's a big play towards direct to employer. And quite frankly, if you think about this crisis has not hit everybody the same. You've seen the payers in many ways have been emboldened. They've had, financially done extremely well out of this crisis. And so, there is a major risk that they'll use this to, buy up primary care and essentially commoditize what we do. So there's risk there. If you see in terms of Silicon Valley, all these digital health companies can now raise money on a dime, and they're all looking to come in and take a little piece of our market. And there's a bit of a like death by 1,000 cuts. So we've been, very focused on shoring up our primary care position and creating some very creative partnerships, and really looking at the integration with independents in that space and saying, how do we better connect with them? How do we better create value for those physicians in being our network? And so that we can operate more holistically. This is one area. Then I would say surgery has been another area. And quite frankly, there's some things we've done well, some things we've done very badly. We veered, back to your original question, very much in terms of the safety aspect. And we said, right, well, we're going to be the safest place to get your care. And it sounds like a very good tagline. And we got, safe care. I got a logo there, safe care.
Yeah, it's a new podcast you guys have.
Around it. And it certainly sounds quite good. The challenge that when we come to deploying it, though, we started, first of all, like getting almost anybody who's speaking to a patient to start screening them for COVID, which means a surgical patient who might speak to 10 different groups of people in a day, like just getting hammered from every angle with the damn questions, sometimes twice on the same phone call. We've tried to, we've actually built out a digital care pathway for our pre-surgical journey, which provides all these, a lot of the screening questions and navigates people to their testing, et cetera. And that's been quite helpful, but also struggled then to turn off a lot of the human questioning. So on one hand, we've been able to build in digital tools, not just to screen patients, but also to treat COVID patients at home. And we provided those free to our community. It's still like, we haven't really got the balance right, where we're just like gone way over the top in terms of safe care. And quite frankly, our experience scores have collapsed. And, we've had surgeons feeling like they're having to take their patients elsewhere because the patients are getting bugged. So our dirty laundry here, it's a little tricky, right? You can try and do the right thing, but then the right thing ends up being the wrong thing. And so just navigating through this day by day.
Yeah, and one of the things I did see that you guys did is, and I think this was relatively recent, there was a video of a woman named Margaret, who was one of your, I think she might have been in your facilities team, and it was, Margaret, keeping clean, safe facilities, and it was putting a face to this idea where, is that the idea that you have clean, safe facilities. which, kind of, not, no pun intended, sounds a bit sterile and can be a little, can be a little bit robotic. But when you put the face to it, it's like, this is Margaret. This is a person who's coming in to kind of help make sure that you're safe. Humanized that very important piece of things from a safety standpoint. And I think, one of the things we've all seen that I think is a certain circumstance right now where everybody can really kind of benefit from this is that I think it was Chris Bevelo said this probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I heard him say it, and I kind of resonated with me, was that physicians and care providers right now are the heroes that firemen and police officers were during 9/11. It's because the community recognizes the fact that they've put their life on the line and are still putting their life on the line to take care of us. And so there's this massive goodwill towards physicians. And so I think to some extent, it's kind of a little bit of a positive in the sense that, hospitals have begun to realize they have a role that tech companies just can't fill. There's a place that, tech companies, no matter how much money they have, and no matter how good they are at what they do with, the patient journey, they can't meet that, right? And so there's an opportunity there to kind of put a face and use that goodwill towards helping the build that reputation, build that brand, and that those relationships with that. So no, I thought it was good. You mentioned you showed the logo for the With Safe Care. I was curious. I saw that you guys had launched the podcast. I don't know when you launched it, but do you have any sense of like what have been the effects of that? Has that been something that's been picked up on and particularly valuable?
Yeah, I'm probably not the right person to ask. But I feel like we've been getting good feedback on it. So I think it's probably more positive than not.
Okay. Yeah, it was interesting. I hadn't seen one that was specifically from a hospital around Safe Care podcast, but I thought it was an interesting one.
Well, part of that, I mean, so Safe Care is, this broad part is just trying to attract patients just back to our hospitals. But really looking at innovate. I mean, one thing I'm playing around right now is like zero weight ED. And it's something I've kind of wanted to do for years, but could never really do because of our focus on value-based care and our CEO never wanting to advertise our EDs. But what we've found that pretty much these low acuity patients are not coming back to our EDs. They might be coming to somebody else's, but not to ours. And so the idea of being able to put a virtual triage step within the ED workflow and basically have people schedule their ED visit. They can get in line online. They can do a virtual triage that could potentially become a video visit and keep them out of the ED. And then they can, stay in line in their car. And then when we're ready for them, they can come straight to the front desk, not sit in the waiting room and be ushered straight back. So little elements like that, which kind of really transforms the ED value proposition in a very competitive ED market. I feel like that safe care can be powerful and long-lasting way beyond COVID. And it's something that if we could really start innovating around that and start coming up with meaningful products that align with safety, that safety is a pretty good thing to build a brand around.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but what Tom was saying about using the safety measures that we put in place for longer term innovation in healthcare delivery. So at Atrium Health, one of the things that we did, and I'm sure other hospitals and health systems were considering or have implemented something similar, was around this kind of virtual hospital for coronavirus patients. So patients that had tested positive for COVID could get access to physicians and care in the comfort of their home. And I know other systems, I think it might have been either Intermed, other one had talked about launching a virtual hospital. I remember when, this was way before COVID even hit, there was talk about how could that model be successful, having a hospital without walls. And I think that now we've been forced to innovate because we've had, COVID impacting us all. And I think we're going to look at things differently around safety and how we can truly innovate and bring care into the home for patients. And so I think that model, regardless of whether or not we're in the middle of a COVID pandemic or not, this concept of a virtual hospital is something that I think a lot of health systems are going to think about as a way to deliver care differently. So excellent point.
Yeah, and I would echo that too. I mean, you know, we obviously have a combination of inpatient and outpatient services, and we've been able to stand up completely virtual clinics. I mean, our post-COVID, you know, at-home recovery clinic with occupational and physical care, physical therapy is completely virtual at this point. And, you know, I think, you know, a couple of you have kind of mentioned that, you know, pre-pandemic, pre-COVID, there were some hesitations, I think, amongst providers to adopt and truly leverage telemedicine, whereas I think probably this group has always probably been pushing for digital transformation. You know, and I think it's really interesting to see that adoption, both on the provider side and the excitement to really leverage those services, and then the patient adoption as well. I mean, I think, you know, we were quite surprised that even the older demographic of 60 plus really were faster adopters during the pandemic than what we anticipated. I think probably partly because of necessity, but you know, but I think also as you know, marketers and communicators, it's our job to educate, right? So how do you use a video visit? How do you use, you know, what, and putting out content about you know, helping make that adoption easier, because it's not a tangible thing. You have to turn it into something that's tangible. And I think for everyone, we've all experienced this sort of telemedicine thing becoming an actual tangible product. And it has really, I mean, I'm sure everyone has experienced this, but the shift has been really interesting to watch. And I think for us internally, even the shift in, you know, cross-functional teams, right? Having to track, you know, what the telemedicine adoption rates are. I mean, that whole reporting and analytics platform wasn't even there. Now it is. You know, so I think there's a lot of cross-functional success, and I think that togetherness that everyone has really talked about spans, you know, both internally and externally. So, you know, I mean, the digital transformation has really been very exciting to watch.
Yeah, no, and Kaylin, I think you bring up a really good point, is that, you know, I think 30, 60, 90 days ago, you know, telehealth was something that, you know, was kind of a nice sort of side thing that we kind of do. And over the last 90 days, we've all seen, you know, all the stats and how it's exploded and how many people are looking at it. We've done our own surveys and found that, you know, north of 80% of people said they're still looking to do telehealth even after COVID is behind us. So there's just massive adoption on that side. And as a result of that, you know, many organizations ran into this and just said, hey, let's just get Zoom and stand it up and, you know, figure out how to do it, or, you know, like whatever these things were. What are some of the challenges that you all have seen in kind of getting this to a place where it's gone from emergency, got to have something tomorrow, to long-term, this is going to be a platform? Like, what are the things that you found that have been lacking in the solutions that you found, or the technology you've put together? What have been some of those challenges that you've been trying to overcome?
I would say one of the main challenges is getting a consumer from the, you know, awareness of telehealth to that trial of telehealth, to get them past the fear. And I feel I actually have an example of a person who had a lot of fear to even try it, but they reluctantly tried it because they really needed it, and there was not an option to come in for an in-person visit. And now they are an advocate. So, you know, I think getting them past that fear to the point of trial is really critical for sustaining telehealth.
Yeah. I would imagine user experience there is a big part of it. If they've got, big downloads they have to do, and one group that we talked to, they said every telehealth visit we have, we actually have two, because the first one is for our team to call them and make sure they've got everything set up right, and they have enough bandwidth to do it, and then we get the doctor on the second meeting. So I would imagine that that's a big piece of it.
Mhm. I would agree.
That is definitely what we're looking at right now. With this rapid adoption, we had a platform already available to the patients, but because we had to rapidly implement it, now we're really going back and optimizing our workflow to look at that patient experience, patient and provider experience. That's why I was mentioning earlier about sort of the digital front door and how is that accessible to the patients. For example, we do all of our video visits through mobile devices for both the patients and the providers. In looking at the challenges that have gone with that, some have been, it makes it much easier. In other cases, for like our senior population, it's terrifying to them. So looking at, we brought together some volunteer supportive staff to do those outreaches and call the patients, especially our older population, and really walk them through how to download our app and have the video visit and make sure that it's successful for them. So yeah, patient experience is key, because if they don't want to do it, or it's too overwhelming for them, we've just stopped. We've really prevented a lot of the access that we could be having today, or that will even be converted into the future.
Yeah. That's great. And it's interesting you mentioned, Lisa, bringing up the digital front door, because I think digital front door in healthcare marketing circles has been kind of a hot discussion and almost buzzword, for a while now. But I think a lot of hospitals, when you get to the clinical and executive side, sometimes it's kind of like, yeah, but we got referral patterns, and things like that. And like, it's a nice thing to have. And now, when a lot of this, it's just become obvious and apparent that the digital patient journey is the patient journey at this point, that's become a really, really important piece of this. So, and I know, Caitlin, you've done a lot of work on patient journeys in particular, and kind of thought about, what those look like and how those, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on how that has evolved with COVID, and now that everybody's basically living online and separately, what has changed in there, and how are you guys responding to it?
Yeah, I mean, we are definitely in an interesting market. I mean, there has been, a mass exodus from it's going into the summertime, of course. So, normally we have a lot of people who have second homes or visit family quite a bit, and we've seen a lot of people, continuing their care with telemedicine, and that from a retention standpoint has been huge. And the patient journey for telemedicine, thankfully, pre-COVID, we had really mapped that out quite extensively. And so we were really able to kind of finalize and stand up those plans really, really fast, which I think was huge when it came to adoption, particularly for the older population that you mentioned. Lisa, I mean, we noticed and kind of going into this knew that was not only going to be a necessity because of, just the nature of comorbidities and the impact that those have with COVID-19 patients. And so we had lots of how-to videos, explain videos already either launched or in motion. And so we thankfully were able to expedite all of that and make sure that it was all live within the first couple of weeks. And, I think that, this education piece that Jamie was talking about remains to be really important, but it's also super important to the patient journey as a whole, right? I mean, we know that patients start by searching the second that they have, an exam that comes back or a pending diagnosis, right? I mean, that journey starts online, and more so now than ever. And so we've really, we've been able to push internally too with some of our cross-functional teams. And I think that importance has really been adopted internally as well. So, everything from, updating our GMB listings to include our digital health front door, right? I mean, the moment that Google My Business allowed for that to happen, we were really grateful to be in a position to take advantage of that. And so, I think, well, in parallel tracks, there were a lot of practices and providers at the specialty level who maybe hadn't been leveraging telemedicine yet as much, and were starting to take the new patient appointments virtual. We were kind of in a parallel track where we were able to support that with a lot of educational content to overcome those hurdles, and be a part of that total patient journey.
Yeah, that's great. And we've been working with a lot of clients on, like you said, GMB, and kind of making sure that, they've got all of their information updated. They've got they've allowed the banners for saying, where COVID-19 testing locations are, being able to have some of those different online booking and virtual care options go into the GMB panels. I know some of the third-party healthcare sites like Healthgrades and Vitals have done that as well, being able to get some of those things in. So it really helps with the awareness side, kind of being able to help the public know what their options are and have access to the care that they need. And I know one of the things I've been working with a lot of clients on over the last, probably 30 to 60 days has been this idea of as, patients come back into the healthcare system, it's really going to be following a little bit of almost looks like a technology adoption curve where you have kind of your early adopters who are going to be coming back in. And in the healthcare space, obviously, it's a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit lumpier, start, right, than a normal technology adoption curve would be, because you have some people who have maybe not essential but highly necessary services they have to get. You have obviously latent demand that's built up there, but you're going to have some of those people who are going to be coming in, and there's going to be a majority that will come later. And a lot of times, one of the things we've seen is that it's really, really important, talking about, kind of this idea of telling people it's safe. We all have, campaigns we're running. We mentioned, Tom, the podcast that you guys launched around that, and some of the different things, here together, kind of campaigns and those sorts of things. But one of the things that is really important is leveraging the people who come in first to let their voice be heard, that, we had a good experience. This is safe, because obviously, to Caitlin, to your point, everybody grabs a phone or a browser and they go Google and start looking around. And, one of the things they're looking for is like, what are other people saying about this? And how is this, how are people experiencing this care right now? And so how are you systematically grabbing feedback from those initial employees or initial patients, and helping that get out into the ecosystem, so that it's not just your campaign, but it's also the voice of your community and the people you're serving who are saying, hey, this is safe, this is a good experience. All of you may have seen this. I think it was on LinkedIn. And gosh, I'm trying desperately to go back into the archives of my mind and remember the group that did this, but it was a consulting group. It was one of the partners, had gone into the healthcare system and literally had that experience where she had gone to what she called Hospital A. She was a professional, so she didn't name the organization, but she's like, I went to Hospital A and it was terrible, and like, here's all these horrible things that happened. And then I went to Hospital B and it was this really great experience. And then she used it because she's a healthcare strategy consultant, used it to kind of outline, hey, this is the ways that you can improve and do things and what you can learn from this. And I think a lot of times patients are having those experiences, but patients are going to be a little bit less professional. They're going to name names. And so, saying, how do you capture the good experiences? Because as we all know, anybody who's got an axe to grind, they're going to have the energy to go out on the web and say something. The happy patients are what I call the silently satisfied majority. They're kind of folks who are like, hey, this is a great experience, but they don't necessarily think to go say something, right? At least not publicly. And so have any of you thought about or put into place ways to be able to capture that kind of initial sentiment and use that effectively to kind of let your communities tell the story about how safe you are and how good of a place you are to receive care?
I mean, we have a review management. I don't know how many of you have a review management platform that, generates interesting to hear, you know, how many folks all have that platform.
So you've got that now. Or have you been able to systematically kind of put that into all like the places where you've begun reopening care and kind of proactively using that effect to get those reviews?
Well, I mean, a lot of our were considered essential, and unfortunately, chronic heart conditions, cancer, all of those things still continue throughout COVID, right? So we left a lot of those things in place. But I have noticed a downward trend. I mean, there's just a general downward trend in number of visits anyway, but the percentage seems to be less number of folks who are willing to review after a virtual visit versus an in-person visit. So I'm curious to hear if anyone else has noticed that as well, because gathering some of those testimonials to be a bit more difficult than it was before.
Yeah, it definitely can be. Anybody have any experiences around that?
Well,
Go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. We kind of had a negative experience with, it kind of reminded me of the scarlet letter syndrome because I'm in a rural small town. So once we had our first COVID cases and then the word within the community started spreading as to who it was, unfortunately, that patient got the kind of cold treatment from their neighbors. And, you know, it really was a sad situation because they, you know, instead of them getting the support from their community and the neighbors, at least, people kind of treated the positive cases as kind of the scarlet letter people. So it's been kind of a delicate situation in order to, you know, get people to express appreciation for the care that we've been able to provide for COVID.
Yeah.
I would say there's a couple of things that we've been doing for our telehealth encounters. We've made it a very short 5-question survey for our patients. So we're getting great response from that. I think we're getting about 80% response rate just because it's such a short, quick survey, which is much less than our in-person surveys. Or for an in-person visit. So that has definitely helped us. And then I would say a lot of our marketing campaign all along, and including during the COVID-19 period, has been around patient testimonials as well as even provider testimonials. We haven't specifically filmed or promoted a testimonial about a patient having a telehealth encounter. We have during the patients receiving care during the pandemic, but that is something that we should probably focus more on. It would probably help to drive up our utilization a little bit more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, we're obviously in closing moments here. So I guess maybe if you have any quick thoughts on this, I know one of the toughest things to balance right now is that everybody has gone through, you know, pretty massive revenue reductions just because of having to put, you know, elective surgeries on pause and that sort of thing. And so having to come back in, there's really one of those, you're kind of in a case where you can't really cut your way to success. You have to grow. So getting volumes back up, and not even necessarily just back up to where they were, but growing them even beyond that to make sure that you recover. But at the same time, having to be more conservative fiscally. Yeah. Any thoughts on how you're balancing that tension that you're having to live in right now? Tom?
I might throw out one set of ideas, which we haven't done, but positioning to do. And I'd say one thing we have done quite well is integrate our digital front door, so it's all pretty seamless, so you can do your screenings or your virtual visits, etc. Getting relatively excited about the idea of partnering with employers, with schools, etc., about doing back to school, back to work COVID testing as a way to acquire new members of our app. And the thinking, like, if you can get people on our app and they're having this wonderful experience, that they might then use that app to schedule appointments and consume more care. And did put a lot of effort into proxy management, and so it's very easy for a young mother to schedule that COVID testing for their child.
Yeah.
And you can then collect those results on behalf of the school district. And to the extent you can do the follow-up, bugging parents who haven't got their kids tested, and make sure that you can take that whole burden off the schools. And then the schools then end up marketing your app as the only way to get these types of services, and combine that with screenings on wheels type thing in the school car park. I think there's some pretty neat ways to acquire new patients like that.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's very growth hackery. It's very nice. I like it. That's a great strategy. Any other thoughts from anyone?
I mean, we've actually done, and I think this kind of echoes what we've heard a bit, but I mean, the amount of communication and education to really cultivate that relationship with the patient, and because we became, as healthcare institutions became, a leader for accurate, reliable information. I think building on that relationship and continuing that momentum is really going to be critical for us, because a lot of that content is very organic. I mean, sending an email blast is much different than, an out-of-home campaign, particularly here in New York. So we'll definitely be, continuing that content development and leveraging all the different content types. But also, because we've had such a lot of cross-functional innovation throughout this time, refocusing on that digital front door and making sure that that's a priority. We're an academic institution, so we're going into a new fiscal year straight out of COVID. So it's, a lot of web development work and really focusing on that patient journey and that relationship.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, definitely would be an exciting time for you for sure. So any other final thoughts before we wrap up? Going once, going twice. Good deal. All right. Well, everybody, I really appreciate your time today. It was a good discussion, and hopefully this was something that was interesting and valuable to you. And we'll share. We'll get this together. We'll probably share it around in some various areas ourselves, obviously, and give it to you as well, so you can have that for your use. But if we can do anything for you, let us know. And thank you guys very much for your time.